You're listening to From Stillness, an audiobook for a mind in need of quiet. There comes a moment in life, maybe not loud, maybe not dramatic, when you just feel tired. Not physically, not even emotionally, but soul tired. Like you've been running with a backpack full of invisible bricks. Like you've been trying for so long, holding everything together, keeping it all moving, that even breathing starts to feel like effort. And what's strange is, you've been doing everything right. You show up, you work hard, you keep thinking, fixing, improving, reading, planning. You try harder. And when that doesn't work, you try again. But deep down, behind the logic and the planning, there's this quiet, stubborn ache. A whisper that says, maybe I'm not supposed to try this hard. We don't talk about this kind of fatigue often, the kind that isn't solved by a good night's sleep. The kind that comes from constantly pushing, constantly performing, constantly carrying the weight of a life that never feels fully settled. It's easy to mistake this tiredness for laziness, or weakness, or lack of discipline. But what if it's none of those things? What if it's a sign that something deeper needs to shift? Because the truth is, there's a difference between trying and aligning, between forcing and flowing, between carrying life and letting life carry you. And when your energy is constantly spent on effort, there's no room left for grace. This isn't about giving up. It's about letting go of the belief that relentless effort is the only way. Maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop gripping so tightly and start listening to the part of you that's quietly asking for peace. We grow up being told that if something isn't working, the answer is to try harder, push more, wake up earlier, fix ourselves, hustle, win. Effort becomes our identity. Control becomes our safety net. So when life feels stuck, our instinct isn't to pause, it's to tighten our grip. Do more, think more, plan more, as if sheer force could bend life to our will. But no one teaches us the other half of the truth, that sometimes the solution isn't effort but trust. And that's hard. Because trust feels unfamiliar when all you've ever known is pressure. It feels reckless to ease up when the world tells you to push. It feels dangerous to rest when your fear says everything will fall apart if you stop. But here's the shift. Control is rooted in fear. Trust is rooted in wisdom. Control says, if I don't manage everything, I'll lose everything. Trust says, what's meant for me doesn't need to be forced. Trust isn't about giving up. It's about loosening your grip on things that were never yours to carry in the first place. It's about recognizing that not everything needs to be fixed, rushed, or micromanaged to be okay. Some things fall into place the moment you stop trying to make them fit. Because what you attract in life is rarely what you chase. It's what you align with. When your actions are driven by panic, you create resistance. But when your energy comes from peace, life responds differently. This is the quiet power of trust. Not loud, not flashy, not controlling. Just grounded, open, calm. A different kind of strength. One that doesn't exhaust you. One that finally lets you breathe. Sometimes we think we're being disciplined, but we're actually just scared. We overdo, overthink, over-explain. We show up when we're exhausted. We give more than we have. Not because we're inspired, but because deep down, we're terrified that if we stop trying, everything will fall apart. It's subtle. It hides behind good intentions. But often, relentless effort is just fear in disguise. Fear that we won't be chosen if we are not always proving. Fear that we'll fall behind if we slow down. Fear that we're not worthy unless we're constantly performing. But here's what most people don't realize. Trying too hard is often a sign that you don't trust yourself. You don't trust your timing. You don't trust your instincts. You don't trust that what's right for you will still find you, even if you're not chasing it down. So instead of moving from peace, you move from panic. And that kind of effort doesn't build a life. It drains one. You can force the job, the relationship, the opportunity. You might even get it. But if you abandon yourself in the process, ignore your body, override your intuition, silence your truth, you'll arrive exhausted, disconnected, and unsure why it still doesn't feel right. Trust changes that. Because when you trust, you stop operating from lack. You stop treating life like something you have to earn. You stop proving and start aligning. You begin to ask, is this path actually true for me, or am I just trying not to be left behind? That's the shift, from self-abandonment to self-honoring, from fear-driven doing to peace-driven being. Letting go feels dangerous when your whole life has been built on control. You were taught to push harder, to prove yourself, to plan every step, to solve every unknown before it arrives. Control became your safety blanket, not because it worked, but because it gave the illusion of certainty. But here's the truth most people avoid. The more you try to control everything, the more you feel out of control. Because deep down, control is rooted in fear. And fear makes you grip things that were never meant to stay. You end up holding on to timelines that don't fit, people who drain you, dreams that no longer belong to the person you've become. And you wonder why everything feels so heavy. But trust, real trust, isn't about doing nothing. It's not passivity, it's power. Quiet power. The kind that doesn't need to chase or convince or perform. Trust allows. It lets things breathe. It makes space for life to meet you halfway. It invites the right things in by releasing your grip on the wrong ones. Because you don't attract what you force, you attract what you align with. When you stop panicking every time there's silence. When you stop rushing to fix discomfort the moment it arises. When you stop measuring your worth by how busy or productive you are. That's when the real shift begins. You realize uncomfortable doesn't mean unsafe. Silent doesn't mean stagnant. And slow? Slow often means sacred. Letting go of control isn't about giving up. It's about finally allowing what's true to come forward, without all the noise, pressure, and performance. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. There's something quietly powerful that begins to unfold when you stop living from pressure and start living from peace. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a shift so gentle, you almost miss it. The way your breath deepens, the way you stop rushing to respond, the way your mornings feel less like survival and more like arrival. You no longer force yourself into conversations just to fill silence. You stop chasing people just to prove you're worth staying for. You begin to notice that not everything urgent is important, and not everything loud deserves your attention. This is the quiet return, not to a version of you who performs, but to the part of you who already knows what matters. At first, it feels unfamiliar. You were trained to equate noise with value, motion with meaning, speed with success. But now, you're starting to see that the most valuable things in life, clarity, peace, connection, don't need to shout. They arrive when there's space. They thrive in stillness. And so you begin to protect your energy, not from fear, but from reverence. You no longer measure your worth by productivity, but by presence. You stop over-explaining, over-apologizing, overcompensating, not because you've hardened, but because you've softened into self-respect. Peace becomes your new compass. If it disrupts your peace, it's not your pace. If it makes you shrink, it's not your path. If you have to force it, it's not for you. You start moving from clarity, not desperation. You begin to say no without guilt. You give yourself permission to pause without shame. And in that space, that open, quiet space where effort turns into trust, life begins to meet you differently. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're no longer getting in the way. We've all been taught that progress means motion, constant doing, constant proving. That if something matters, you must chase it. That if you want peace, love, success, you must earn it, effort your way into it, hustle until you finally deserved it. But what if the most meaningful things in life don't respond to force? Real peace doesn't come because you did everything right. It arrives when you realize you don't need to do everything at all. You begin to sense that trying harder doesn't always take you further. Sometimes it pulls you out of alignment, out of presence, and into a frantic loop of proving, fixing, chasing, performing. But trust shifts that entire equation. When you trust, you stop trying to manufacture worth. You stop asking every silence to reassure you. You stop chasing closure from people who were never meant to understand you. Trust doesn't mean you sit still and wait for life to happen. It means you stop interfering with its timing just because you're uncomfortable. You start to see discomfort differently, not as a problem to fix, but as a place where truth emerges, the space where wisdom gathers, the tension before growth. And because you trust the process, you no longer panic when it's quiet. You no longer rush when things take time. You stop interpreting stillness as failure. Something beautiful happens when you finally stop interrupting your life with doubt. You begin to feel it moving again, slowly, calmly, naturally. Not because you pushed it, but because you allowed it. The very things you used to force start arriving on their own, not urgently, but peacefully. Not dramatically, but surely. And in that rhythm, you start living differently. Not with anxiety in your chest, but with trust in your body. Not with fear in your decisions, but with grounded awareness. You're no longer asking life to hurry. You're simply walking beside it, one step at a time, knowing you are exactly where you need to be. You don't need to chase a life that's already aligned with you. That's the quiet realization that rises when you begin to trust. It's not about giving up on effort, it's about refining where your effort goes. Instead of pouring your energy into control, urgency, or performance, you start investing it into presence, intention, and peace. When you operate from trust, you're no longer asking every outcome to validate your worth. You're no longer relying on speed to soothe your anxiety. You stop clinging to timelines that were never yours, and you stop treating every delay like a detour. Instead, you begin to understand that some delays are direction, some endings are protection, some pauses are preparation. Trust changes your relationship with time. You stop checking for progress every 5 minutes. You stop comparing your journey to someone else's highlight reel. And you start asking different questions, not why is this taking so long, but what is this season making space for? That shift is powerful because it brings you back to the present, to your body, to your breath. And in that stillness, you stop needing everything to happen now. You stop needing constant proof that you're on the right path. You start living like you already are. From that place, you act differently. Not from fear, but from alignment. Not because you're trying to fix or chase or rush, but because you feel grounded enough to choose. And that groundedness is magnetic. The right people, the right opportunities, the right answers, they don't come because you demanded them. They come because you became the version of you who's finally ready to receive them. So no, trust isn't passive. It's not about waiting around, hoping life changes. It's about walking with life, at its rhythm, not your panic. It's about learning to let the present moment be enough, even when it's unfinished, unclear, unresolved. Because when you no longer treat the unknown as a threat, you finally begin to experience it as what it truly is, possibility. Trust doesn't always feel safe at first. In fact, if you've spent most of your life surviving, hustling, overthinking, or performing, trust might feel completely unnatural. It might even feel dangerous. Letting go of control when control is all you've ever known. That's not just difficult, it can feel like free-falling. If you were taught that love must be earned, if your worth was measured by your output, if you grew up believing safety only comes from sacrifice, then of course trust feels foreign. Of course rest feels wrong. Of course stillness makes your chest tighten. You're not broken for feeling that way. You're just human, and your nervous system is doing its best to protect you with what it learned. But here's the truth that survival mode never teaches. You weren't meant to grind your way into alignment. You weren't meant to clench your jaw through every chapter of your life and call it discipline. You were never built to live on edge, waiting for permission to breathe. There's a quieter way, a gentler one. One where you don't have to abandon yourself to stay on track. Where success doesn't mean sacrificing your soul. Where forward doesn't mean forcing. That's what trust restores. Not just faith in life, but faith in you. Your pace, your timing, your inner compass. It gives you back your breath, your clarity, your space to listen again. Because when you stop trying to be 10 steps ahead of everything and everyone, you finally arrive. Here, in your body, in your moment. No longer scanning the horizon for danger or chasing some future version of peace. You start to feel what's true now. That's the power of trust. Not that it guarantees everything will go your way, but that it reconnects you with your own way. And slowly, softly, it teaches you how to feel safe again, without needing to control everything. There's a moment in your journey where something shifts, quietly, almost invisibly. You stop asking, "How do I get what I want?" And you begin asking, "Am I becoming the person who aligns with what I want?" It's no longer about chasing outcomes. It's about matching their frequency. It's not about pushing harder. It's about becoming still enough, clear enough, open enough to actually receive. Because the truth is, we don't attract what we force. We attract what we are. You could spend your entire life trying to achieve a version of success that doesn't even match your values anymore. You could chase relationships that keep you anxious, goals that keep you numb, and milestones that never really satisfy you, all because you never pause long enough to ask if any of it truly fits. That's the quiet danger of striving without self-awareness. You might reach everything you worked for, only to realize it was never what you needed. But trust changes that. It slows you down just enough to reflect. It gives you space to check in with your deeper self, not just your outer ambition. It makes you ask, do I even want this anymore? Or is this just a story I've been living on autopilot? That kind of honesty is hard, but it's freeing. You stop saying yes out of fear. You stop performing your life for applause. You start choosing things that feel real. Things that honor your nervous system, not just your resume. Things that leave you feeling full, not just validated. And slowly, the whole architecture of your life begins to shift, not from force, but from alignment. The relationships that remain are the ones where you can breathe. The work you do feels meaningful, not just impressive. The way you speak to yourself becomes kinder, clearer, more truthful. You're no longer proving. You're no longer convincing. You're simply living in a way that reflects who you're becoming. And in that subtle shift, you start to realize you were never far away from the life you wanted. You just needed to slow down long enough to become someone who could meet it with open hands. There comes a moment, quiet but undeniable, when you realize the life you've been chasing isn't the one you truly want. Not because it's wrong, but because it was born from pressure, from proving, striving, fixing, and always being just a little behind. And in that moment, something shifts. Not loudly, not with fireworks, but gently. Like a breath you didn't know you'd been holding, finally released. You stop asking, "How do I get there faster?" and start asking, "How do I feel more here?" You begin to understand that peace isn't the reward at the end of a perfect plan. It's the foundation. It's where real clarity begins, not when everything is figured out, but when you finally stop needing everything to be. Because life responds differently when you're no longer forcing it. When your energy no longer carries fear, desperation, or urgency. When you stop moving from a place of not enough and start choosing from a place of already whole. This doesn't mean you give up on growth, ambition, or change. It means you stop abandoning yourself to get there. You still show up, you still care, you still dream. But you do it without the tightness in your chest, without the fight in your nervous system. You move from stillness now, from grounded presence, from trust. And from that place, everything flows differently. The right people feel safer around you. The right decisions feel clearer within you. And the life that once felt so far away, it doesn't need to be chased anymore. It begins to arrive, quietly, steadily, and without force. All because you finally remembered what striving made you forget, that you were already enough. Especially here, especially now, in stillness, in softness, in trust.